We, the members of the secret order of alchemical actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it.
My name is Dr. Robert C. Thompson, your supreme hierophant for these occult confessions, joined this day, as in all of our interview episodes, by our producer Discordia, Luke Kinneman. Luke, what's up?
Hey, howdy.
It hasn't been very long. We're recording these fairly close together. We just met not a day ago, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't remember what today is. So maybe.
It's been like 48 hours. So today we've got a special treat for you. Luke, who's joining us this day?
We have Lynn Short who is joining us. Lynn, would you like to say hi?
Hello, Rob and Luke.
Hello, Lynn.
Rob and Luke, not yet.
Lynn is a massage therapist and ex-cult member or missionary in Spokane, Washington. She and her husband were part of the Samael Gnostic Society for 17 years, from 2001 through 2018. Samael Gnosis can be boiled down to a compilation of occult theosophy, Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Kabbalah. She currently spends most of her time continuing to deconstruct her religion, riding bikes, and getting back into writing poetry.
Very nice, very nice. So all about the apostate today, Lynn.
Yes, I am that. I very much am. I don't have to stomp around and fly my middle finger in the air anymore, but yes, I am definitely an apostate.
So now the word cult, you're comfortable with that?
I am.
Okay.
At least in the generalized sense of it. I think the bite model from Stephen Hassan is both good and also a little too I don't know what I feel about it, honestly. I think a lot of it is good, but there's some lack there as well. Just much my personal opinion.
Tell folks a little bit about that so they give them a cue in. The bite model, that is.
The bite model? The bite model is about what a cult specifically is, in terms of there's 4 specific areas of control, and that's behavior, information flow, B-I-T-E-T-T, damn it. Emotions and some other thing. What's the T stand for? Oh, damn it. Behavior, information, something, and emotional control. Yeah. And I am missing the T. Yes, that's going to sound like I really know what I'm talking about.
Folks can write in about that. I mean, the reason I ask about the word cult is because media has used it, of course, to falsely malign some groups or incorrectly loop groups together.
For sure.
Religion scholars like to use the word often, like we could refer to Christianity as a cult in the times of Jesus. So,
sure.
Yeah, it has a lot of connotations.
I kind of like. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good. I'm good. I'm done.
I kind of like to use the term more high control group because it's just really clear about what that is.
Yeah, I like that. High control group.
Yeah.
So, give us a little background. So, Samael, this is not someone, I think most folks, I don't want to offend the Samael people, but not your top shelf occultist as far as cult history is concerned. Not an Aleister Crowley, not a Helena Blavatsky.
No, he's definitely more obscure, and it could be that it partially had to do with where he came from, because he was born in Colombia and didn't migrate much further past Mexico. So I think his teaching stayed fairly localized until it came into California, and somewhere on the East Coast from his own missionaries kind of migrating up to save the world.
So Spanish-speaking group initially.
Initially, yeah, for sure.
So in Colombia is where it gets a start.
Yes, yeah. So he was born in Colombia around 1917, died around 1977. So he kind of crosses over from the late occult period, the late 1800s, early 1900s, the new religions that were sort of building up in the East Coast of
Sure.
America, anyway, the United States, anyway.
Well, the teens are the Crowley years, right? I mean,
Right.
so
Yep.
still a very
Yep.
productive time in
Yep.
occultism.
Yep. And he stated that his own teaching started his own teaching sometime in 1940s, late 40s. And he referred to himself as Enwior, Samael Enwior, even though he was born as Victor Gomez.
It does have a ring to it.
Right. Yeah. Samael is the god of Mars, and so he fully awakened into the god of Mars on planet Earth, apparently. I have no way of verifying that.
So does that mean that he was born the god of Mars? He was a reincarnated god, or that
he reawakened into the reincarnation of Samael.
Okay, all right. But he was that all along? Like, could I reawaken into the reincarnation of Jupiter?
He was that all along, but hadn't awakened into it. And
Okay.
so that's his teaching is that process of awakening into whatever the God head that you would be. And he just happened
so I
to
can
be.
too. I could do it.
Yes,
you can do
can
it. Anyone
too.
can do it.
You probably
Okay.
wouldn't be the avatar of Aquarius like he was. Like he's not. He's extra special. Like you would be special as a god on Earth, but you wouldn't be nearly as special.
Okay.
So yeah.
You could still reach godhood, just not
Yes,
to
but it
his
would be
caliber.
Yes, you would be a lesser god. Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
A chthonic god, perhaps.
Yes.
That's how I like to think of myself, anyway. So
it is pantheistic. His religion is multiple gods.
Okay, but are there gods in heaven as well, or some other plane of being?
Well, there's several dimensions of heaven.
Okay.
And so as you awaken, you're awakening into, so the Kabbalah tree of life, each Sephirah is a realm of heaven. And as you're awakening, you are, as long as you don't spill the magical cup of Hermes, you are awakening to that level of heaven. So when and if you die, if you haven't fully awakened yourself, you at least attain immortality to that level, that Sephiral level.
As far as you go, that's how much of you
Yeah.
persists.
So if you I forget now the names, it's been a while.
That's okay.
I forget the names of the different Sephirah, but like if you are awakening into the next level from the material world, you're awakening into the etheric level, and so that's your level of heaven. And if you die at that point, you at least are immortal at that level of awakening, but it's not the same as if you awakened completely to Keter, depending on how you pronounce that, at the top.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
there are levels of attainment in that.
I got in trouble with some listeners over Eliphas Levy. I was talking about
Oh no,
Sephiroth, and I confused it with the Seraphim. Anyhow,
Seraphim. Yeah, that is different.
different things. So we're climbing the tree of life then.
Yes, that is his teaching in a nutshell, with flavorings of Hinduism, Buddhism, and of course all of the occult stuff.
But at its core, it's this Kabbalistic pursuit.
Yes, but it's so much more than that. Like,
okay,
yeah, I mean,
tell us.
I mean, oh boy. So that is the core. I guess that's the core of the teaching, and the only way that you get to that is by the death of your ego and the birth of your soul, which only happens through the sexual practice that he taught, and then sacrificing for humanity. So those are the three ways in which that you climb the tree.
Okay, so yeah, we're starting to leave the Jews behind now.
Yes, the Jews are not part of this. They're good people, but they are not the chosen ones. The chosen ones are the ones that follow this path. So
yeah, there's a fascinating lore, right, that develops around this, and it all comes straight from him, Victor.
Yeah, his interpretation of it, certainly. He would claim that the other occultists were the precursor for his teaching, because they didn't have the authority from the White Lodge to teach the sexual teaching, which was the key to all of it. But he did, because he's the avatar of Aquarius, heralding in the, the the Kali Yuga. He's heralding in the Kali Yuga, and he is the avatar, bringing in death and destruction to the world so that it can be born anew.
Man, yeah, he is doing a lot of stuff there. That is such a
He
complex
is.
blend of things.
It's so complex, and I studied really hard while I was in it, and now that the wheels are a little rusty, so my apology for fumbling over things.
No, that sounds, I mean, that's wow. I mean, it's just, I'm trying to keep up with all the references here. And I mean, the White
Trust me.
Lodge, that's a Blavatsky thing. Blavatsky, though, was celibate throughout her life. And I would say reading her,
he says she was not.
For the love.
Yes.
That's a bit of a hot take.
Yeah, no, she was not. She had her husband, and they practiced chastity, which wasn't lack of sex. That's an incorrect interpretation. The correct interpretation is the sexual practice, having sex without having an orgasm.
So he says she did that with the man that she was married to for like a year and a half, and then said, "Don't come near me ever."
No, not the first one. The other two. The other two.
Is he claiming she was married to Alcott?
Yeah. That they were having a perfect matrimony in that they were having sexual chastity.
Damn!
I
I'm
don't
not
think
gonna.
there's
I'm gonna
such
let
thing
that
as
be
perfect matrimony if you're not having sex and an orgasm.
I agree with you, and yet this was our lives for 17 years. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave Blavatsky aside because I just can't. But
there's so much. There's so much.
So the sexual practice. Let's return to that idea.
Do you want to? Okay. Do you want to start there?
Yes, might as well.
Or go back to that.
That's where we're living. Yeah. So the White Lodge has informed him that this is how sex is meant to go.
Yes, and the reason that is true, it has to do with. Okay, so in the occult studies, I think Blavatsky, but definitely Steiner, of the ages. It's Hinduism. It's like the ages of the world, and the Lemurians, and all of that, and like they were happy being innocent, soft, non-materialistic entities, but we had to go into the material world in order for God to know itself. And we were told humanity was told by the guardian angels that we needed to deepen our density, and the only way we could do that was through sex. And so we said no. As a humanity, we said no, we're good, we're happy staying where we are. So they enticed us by creating the kunda buffer organ, and we just fucked like bunnies and created all of the suffering in the world. It is the original sin, and we got stuck there. And so the only way out is the reversal of that energy, creating the kundalini, or having the energy go up the kundalini, and creating the soul, basically, through the sexual practice.
So, all right, now I'm confused. So there's an Augustinian premise at the heart of this. I mean, what the story you just told, that original sin and sex have something to do. I mean, fine, Augustine was a little bit circumspect about this, but a lot of Christian fathers, right? I mean, this is a basic Christian premise, right? That sex and original sin are somehow united. Mm-hmm. But okay, so I mean, maybe that gets down to, maybe this is making sense, because orgasm and procreation, we're trying to avoid that.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Right. Yeah. It's not that sex is bad. It's that how we enjoy sex is bad. Because all of the universe, the sexual energy is the creation of all of the universe. And if we are misusing or misguided in using it to deepen our attachment, whether it's attachment to sensation, attachment to the material world, we are following an incorrect path. and we are only going deeper and deeper into materiality. Materiality is bad. We have to regain our divinity by this practice.
So this hermetic, like it's hermetic, right, in the Emerald
Yes.
Tablet sense, but it's also like Blavatsky and maybe Steiner. I'm not as familiar with Steiner, but so he's putting forth the idea that we have passed the point of full materiality and we are now on the upswing back into spirituality.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that is not an automatic process. We have to participate, and this is our participation by sacrificing our sense of desire and our attachment to the material realm.
So do we procreate? Does the cult procreate?
You can.
Good.
Clearly, because Samael himself had 5 kids without really explaining why.
Yeah.
But also there was a practice in the books that was, in order to achieve an awakened child, you could commit to the entire month of May being a sexless couple with having sex on one day, and a singular drop of semen could come out and impregnate the woman, and there's your awakened child. And it had to be in May because it was going to be an Aquarian baby.
Oh, clever.
There's some rigidity to this religion, so just go with that flow. That anything that I describe is that whatever the reasons are for that, I don't have answers for that, because that was Samael's mind.
Now, can I ask you a question, and you may not know the answer? If this happens and you do happen to impregnate your partner in May,
yes,
what if your child is premature?
Good question. I don't have an answer for that one. There's so many things that you could ask. Well, what about this? And I don't know.
We'd have to go back to the source, right?
Yeah, you'd have to go back to the source, or meet Samael in the astral plane and ask him directly, because that was an objective that we all had.
To meet in the astral plane.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so go on. So what? So how do we?
Okay,
how do you live? How do you live?
Well, with the section, so oh boy, so the sexual practice, if you can manage it, then you're probably going to stick with this teaching. But if for whatever reasons it's too difficult for you, or you start having issues with it, you can imagine especially with the American culture and our weirdness around sex, like you can develop some pretty intense paranoia about it, because if you have an orgasm, that is worse than any other sin than you can imagine. And in his teachings, that's the way that it is. And so the pressure to get it right is extreme. And originally it wasn't nearly that bad. Like, we had a couple of mistakes obviously in the beginning, but it was fine. And then somewhere in my 40s, I'm 52, somewhere in my 40s, my body changed, and I found it almost impossible to not have an orgasm, which may be too much information, but I'm happy talking about it.
This is Occult Confessions, Lynn, not Occult Secrets.
Exactly. And here I am confessing my gravest sins.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that we weren't trying to have orgasms. We were trying to do the practice the way that it's taught, which is like having sex with very little movement and very little. It's not sexy sex. It's really just like very you're supposed to think of it in a very sort of loving but mechanical kind of way. You can have pleasure, but not too much pleasure, and it can't be a lot of movement, and lots of chanting has to be involved, and lots of prayer, and lots of begging your divine mother to obliviate this error that you saw that day, and so on. So it's not connecting with your partner in a sort of organic, natural way. It's very prescriptive. So for I am resisting physically. I am trying not to have this happen. And it turns out that's really painful to do that. You know, emotionally, physically, it's really painful to try to stop that from happening. And sometimes it would just sort of like happen. It's not like, you know, usually in sex there's a buildup and then you release. And this was not that sometimes. Yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, it also strikes me, and I don't want to, we'll get as personal as you like here, but that in this
Yeah.
experience, like you're saying, your partner, there's so much focus on, it sounds like sin, right? You're
Yeah.
apologizing, you're confessing maybe in a way, you're dealing with the days that your partner, it's almost like your partner is there to remind you of how wrong sex is and that you should be apologizing for it. Is that right?
Less of that. It's kind of more like say in the day I'm walking around and I get angry. So I have to meditate on my anger. I have to evaluate it and notice it and observe it. And then if we have sex that night, I bring up, you know, we're singing to our divine mothers and we're praying to her, invoking her, creating, you know, it's a ritual, right? So we're bringing her into the present moment, energetically on other planes of existence. And we're, you know, I bring up my anger that I had that day, and we're begging her, both for me and then for Justin, for whatever his sins were that day, to eliminate that sin. And eventually you will purify yourself of your sins in this way. And that's the only way you can do that.
But why any sex in the first place?
That's a really good question. I mean, I can glean knowledge or understanding, comprehension about my sin without that practice. But this was how you energetically, because everything is sex in his teaching, meaning the energy of life, the void, all of it is about the sexual energy. In order to eliminate the ego, you have to be in the sexual energetic fold. That would be a way I could describe it.
So there's this kind of sex magical premise to it. Like it's almost, there's Crowley elements and Randolph and all this. And yes, sex is powerful, but unlike Crowley Randolph, he goes with a like John Humphrey Noyes Oneida community shaker perspective and says, but don't have the orgasm.
But don't have an orgasm. Yes.
Outside of the sex component of it, you know, confessing your sins through the like day, it almost sounded like it could be a cathartic thing, but then everything else that's going on, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think it could be, but we were hyper evaluating. I mean, this was my experience, right? My experience. I was hyper evaluating every emotion, every reaction I was having during the day, and it created this kind of paranoia in me and self-obsession about whether I'd done the bad thing or not today, or whether I'd prayed right today. And so and this wasn't, you know, didn't happen immediately. It just sort of evolved into this and created this just like the way that I moved through the world was kind of painful and dreary and sad because of that. Because I had to I'm looking for the sin. I was told I had to look for how bad I was that day and evaluate myself and place myself upon the butchering block and destroy who I was, because I was inherently bad, permanent, end, stop, period, something like that.
And you're also talking about this like it's almost egocentric. You're so focused on yourself that did you feel cut off from other people by this? I mean, you're self-flagellating, which is awful, but
yes, all the time. Yes, eventually I did, and I think that's very much what I witnessed in the groups. Like if you, I mean, we were a pretty good sized group, the Gnostic Society, which is run by a student of Samael's. He's a director. He lives in Rome, so he's kind of a direct descendant as far as lineage goes. And yeah, it was really pretty harsh.
And that was so it's also a community policed thing.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, we weren't in a commune, so we weren't like, hey, Sally touched the laundry wrong today, so I need to like police her and her behavior. But it was all self-induced, and because the teaching is taught, not only taught by the living people, but also in the doctrine itself, in the writings of Samael, in absolutes and certainties. I don't know how much you've read of his work. It's pretty harsh. There's not a lot of love there, other than for your essence and for your divine mother and for your being. You yourself as a personality is worthless. And I think Samael, personally, is my opinion, I think he undervaluates what it really means to be a person, like the complexities of being a person and the beauty of being a person. I think of being human. I think I just don't think he got it.
Why do you think that? Do you have any speculation on why that might be?
I do not know, because, if you read Blavatsky, or you read some of these other guys, like there's some harshness in there. There's teachings within that condemn the negative aspects, the habits that you have, the attachments that you have. Like, you shouldn't get stuck in your personality too deeply, because all of the new age teaching is about like expanding your awareness and not getting too habitualized to, or too
I know what you mean. It's the habit of being, right? The habit, the material existence.
yeah, because there's so much more to you if you investigate it and you explore it. And if you get too stuck in your habits of like, I have to have toast at 4 o'clock every day, then maybe you don't realize that there's this amazing meal that is more than toast. For a metaphor.
Right. Yeah, but there's a positivity to Blavatsky, right? There's one of my favorite stories about her is there was one instance, maybe she was on a ship, she was constantly traveling, but she received a note from the masters, her ascended masters of the lodges, telling her she was being too harsh to her students and that she should be kinder to them, and that everything was going to be okay. So I feel like there was this back and forth with her, whoever the masters were, that you shouldn't be too much of a taskmaster, that you're guiding people spiritually, and there should be a positivity to it.
Samael never got to that point.
Yeah. Okay.
He kept doubling down and doubling down.
Yeah.
So yeah,
he needed Blavatsky's ascended masters.
I mean, he said claim to have them, right, as far as being connected up to the lodges.
Yeah, for sure.
But the masters are only as good as their student.
Well, I can tell you a lot about the group there.
So, okay, so tell us a bit about your experience then. How do you come to this group?
It was my fault.
Okay.
It was, I found a random flyer in a coffee shop on a course in lucid dreaming or dream yoga that I thought my friend, Justin, who I'm now married to, I thought he and his girlfriend would be really into it, because he was really into these new age, like, manifest your reality kind of stuff. And it turns out she didn't want to go. And I had just moved to Portland, Oregon, and I didn't really have anything to do. So I'm like, I'll go with you. And the instructor that we met that first night just fucking floored us. Like, he was so knowledgeable about all this odd and obscure. And to me, this was my hook, this kind of like pseudo academic work that I was really missing from my college days, which weren't that far behind me, but I was really missing academia and studying and nerdy things and books and having a plan. And, I was wanting that. So he was teaching these really interesting ideas out of his house. And Justin and I had never, while we were never like religiously inclined, neither one of us were raised in a religion. We were like interested in the meanings of life and how to be deep and how to expand ourselves. And here was this giant package giving us all of the answers. And the more we stayed, it became our lives. And Gnosis itself seemed more serious than any other endeavor in any other religion. So we took it on.
And so when are you introduced to Samael as the
Right
source
away.
of this? Oh, okay. So that
Right
was
away.
the premise of the class, was
Yeah.
Samael.
Yeah, like the instructor, oh boy. So this is my opinion. All the Gnostic instructors, we feign humility because we are on the right path and everyone else is wrong. But we are correct. But we are teaching, we are clear that we are teaching Samael's teachings, our own personal revelation of his teachings. We are not the guru ourselves. Whether you as an individual have good integrity and don't take advantage of people, that's another thing altogether. But we are teaching his teaching.
So therein lies the humility.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not uncommon. If you talk to a Catholic and you get down to the heart of it, they'll tell
Right.
you the same thing. I mean, they're
Right.
it's a version of Christianity, and they think it's the best one that will get them to the
Sure.
best part of heaven.
Right. For sure.
So
It's not unfamiliar. It's similar to that.
and where it appealed to you because of the complexity of the, I mean, this makes me feel like I should go start a cult tomorrow, but it appealed
Right.
to you, and maybe I have, the alchemical actors, right, Luke?
It all
Yeah.
depends on the day.
It really does. Rob, what should we do with our time? So we should podcast. But it seems to me, so you're talking about the source, so that it was a library. They handed you a library. Is that right?
When I say package, I meant like the theory of it. It wasn't a physical package. It was just like,
but then you
his
got to go
teachings.
out to research, like look at all these things you should be reading. Is that part of it, or?
Sure, that was part of it. But usually we waited for Samael's books to come into print in English. At the time, in 2001, there weren't that many books printed yet. There's a company called Glorianne who, the guy who originally ran that, senator in California, they were responsible for the printings of the books.
They printed
And
other
so-
things, or just Samael's books?
Mostly in the beginning, just Samael's books.
Okay.
Now, as a company, as a organization, they print plenty of other sacred texts, but only sacred texts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what appealed to? Well, what was the draw? Why did you say
Well-
this? This is the truth.
Because I have a philosophy degree and it was really nerdy and I love that shit. Like,
I see. So it appealed
studying
to.
all of that was really appealing. Yeah.
Does
and
it
then,
appeal to
you
people
know-
who don't or aren't as inclined to
Oh,
the academic
I
side?
imagine it appeals to, that was my hook.
Yeah.
For my husband, it was like his own description of his own hook about it was he was already interested in New Age philosophy and sort of like nerdy counterculture contrarian lifestyle. And it's a very contrarian lifestyle. And so it appealed to him for those reasons. And, everyone else is going to have different reasons for why it would appeal to them.
Was the obscurity part of the appeal?
Sure,
I don't want to harsh
absolutely.
on Columbia. Like it's not Samael's fault that he wasn't born to the British aristocracy or the
Right.
Ukrainian aristocracy, for that matter.
Sure.
I mean, I do think
sure.
Blavatsky pulled herself up by her bootstraps, but Crowley just
For
dropped
sure.
right down in the middle of it. So good
Right.
for Samael for getting these books together and having them translated by somebody eventually.
Well, originally they were just all in Spanish. Once the missionaries that were Spanish speakers came to the US, I think that's when they started, and I don't know that timeline, that started translating them into English. Probably some English Spanish speakers were interested in falling into it and offering to translate books and lectures.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I imagine.
Yeah. So it was in part the fact that this was a secret that nobody else had heard
Yeah.
of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, and
is
it
that
all
more
felt
authentic?
like karmic karmic, like I should stay here because I've found this random flyer in a coffee shop. Like, like
Oh yeah.
that's the sign. It's the sign on the path to telling me I should follow it.
How many people are you meeting with at this house?
It changed over the years. We did have a really vibrant center in Portland for the longest time, and then Justin and I became the main instructors of that school in around 2007. So yeah.
Well, how many people would gather for a class? Were they
Uh,
classes?
we could have as many as 20 people in the house.
Okay.
And then we had, that would decrease as time went on because some people would get tired of it, or the teaching became too harsh, or maybe they had trouble with the sexual teaching in the end. We didn't always get reasons why people would leave, but we had 3 different chambers. We had the public chamber, which was like the basic program of the basic reading of his teaching. And then there was meditation chamber, where we tried very hard to follow his instruction on meditation, which was a pretty abysmal understanding of what meditation actually is, because Justin and I ended up going to actual Buddhists and learning how to meditate through them. And then we had second chamber, which was the ritual aspect, because we had like full on like Masonic chamber in the house with all the trappings, the cubic altar and the checkered board floor and all the other stuff. And we would do ritual in there and meditate for the second chamber. And then we had third chamber, which was the confessional, where we're group confessing our sins and our observations.
How much of my week is devoted to this if I'm a member?
Every day you're devoting something to it. Maybe at
Okay.
your home. Yeah. So
How about
ideally
are we gathering weekly, or are we gathering more than
you're
once a
gathering weekly,
week? Okay.
but some groups would meet more. So there wasn't an absolute about this, but the more classes that you attended, that you had access to, because public chamber could not go visit second chamber, and second chamber could only be invited into third chamber. You are sometimes coming to 2 to 3 events a week, depending on your level of accessibility. And of course, Justin and I are writing lectures. We're reading our own stuff. We're trying to do our own practice, and then we're teaching 4 and 5 nights a week.
What is the spread of this at right now? How many countries is it in? How many people would you estimate?
I can only speak to our branch of it, because there's once Samael died, all of his followers and his kids, like most of his kids, were teaching it. I can't verify or tell you how many stayed teaching it. They all had their own like interpretation of stuff, and some of them had some really awful falling out with each other because they weren't interpreting it quite correctly. So the group that we were with, the Gnostic Society, we are in all the continents except for Antarctica. But I couldn't tell you what countries anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know the number.
That's good though. That does give us sense.
We're in all continents.
Yeah.
We're in South America, the North continent, North American continent. There is a person who's in Africa, two now, because the Canary Islands are part of Africa. You've got the Asian countries. There's a few there. In Europe, there's quite a few. I think probably because the theosophy kind of hits well there.
Mm-hmm.
Australia. Oh, there's a butt ton in Australia and New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go back to meditation.
Yes.
So tell me more. So I know about Buddhist meditation. It's a fairly simple exercise at its heart. What goes wrong, in your opinion, in a Samael meditation?
In Samael meditation, he's so bad at describing what you can do with your attention. So with Buddhist meditation, there's at least the Buddhists that I've gone to retreats with, and I went to an abbey or not an abbey, a monastery in Canada, and studied under an abbot, and studied under some other meditation instructors uh, that did retreats. And there's a weaving of what you can do with your attention when it gets lost. And there's instructions about, okay, I'm having these experiences, I'm having these sensations, or I'm noticing these things in my mind with my practice. And the better the instructor is, the more they can kind of tease you through your way through these obstacles and get you to a deeper flow state, or to jhanic states, which are the different levels of samadhi that you can reach. Although that's my understanding of it, you could, as a religious instructor, you probably know it differently or more or something.
Well, I mean, there's the many flavors of Buddhists, right? But yeah, it's about focus and attention and being present at its core.
Yes, exactly. But what happens then to your attention if you're starting to experiencing a deepening of the quiet of the mind? Like, how do you navigate that? And Samael, just, his instructions were to relax and to get into a half drowsy, sleepy state, which that's not really the goal. That's not really the point,
Mm-hmm.
It is he did try to describe it in a very devotional way. So that would keep your attention probably on your object of concentration, because you're involving the emotions, and that's much more interesting and juicy than just, I'm going to try to not think.
Right. But then what?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly the point. And so we were really frustrated. And granted, our instructor also, our first instructor also taught outside the box, which I really actually appreciate, because he taught us that it was okay to go get information from, lesser religions by going to get taught by other instructors about meditation, in particular the Buddhists. That's who we chose. And so they could help us navigate, whereas Samael just has this very simplistic description, and he's very authoritative, well, you just do the thing, you just do it and stop. That's all the instruction he really gives. Love your divine mother, pray to your, open up your heart and relax and try to get sleepy. That's his, those are his instructions, which are not very good.
But it's a core part of your practice.
It's a core. Yes. It's a very, Samael taught a very practice orientated. So you are meditating, you're doing mindfulness practices, which, so you're trying to not stay so engaged in your train of thought. You're trying to observe the environment around you all the day. And if you get angry, you're noticing that. You're sort of like, okay, I got angry at Sally and it had this flavor. I was angry because I felt insulted, and I felt really defended, and I had these thoughts. And so you take that into your meditation practice and you try to dissolve it or digest it. And you're trying to, interpret the impressions that you have of your day, and all of this. So that it's a very practice orientated. It's not just go to church, sing some hymns, get your wine and biscuit wafer. Sorry, I'm not trying to be derogatory. I'm losing the terminology. The unction, excuse me. And then you're good for the week. This is very involved. You're very invested in all of these practices. And then you're also doing sleep deprivation exercises at night so that you're more likely to be lucid. You are, of course, having the sexual practice. If you are partnered up, you can't have sex unless you're married. That's a have to. So I give him credit for making it very practical. It felt very serious. It felt like we were doing something super important, because we were deeper than other religions. We were invested and involved daily, in this practice, in this path.
But it was psychologically, well, I don't want to say, but it
It's
was psychologically
overwhelming.
demanding. Yeah, very
It's
demanding.
very psychological demanding. And if you can grok that, if that doesn't feel like a burden, if that doesn't feel overwhelming, or you're more like a workaholic and sort of an intensity junkie, because it does, all of these practices and all of this, movement away from the world around you into your internal life has an effect. If you're invested in that and it doesn't feel like harm, you're probably going to like this. Like, it's very monk, you're trying to be a monk, but not in a monastery.
I mean, it does sound, it's the psychologically demanding aspect that it's there is something unique about it. I'll say
Right.
because it's like Scientology. It's like Nexium in this way that you're policing your emotions and your thoughts all the time. But unlike Dianetics and whatever Raniere was doing, I don't know what he called it, I forget, but that program, you have all these Kabbalistic, Hindu, Buddhist like terms and ideas. It's religious.
It's such a mishmash. And once you get into second chamber, it turns on a dime, and it's very Catholic. So we're having ritual in the temple, and we're having mass, which, okay, you want to talk about plagiarism? Samael took Aleister Crowley's mass and most of the book of his rituals. He used that language and that formula for creating his own rituals out of it.
He's not the only one.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I didn't know.
Gerald Gardner has been accused of plagiarizing Crowley. Yeah.
Sure.
So go ahead. Well, so he listed that doesn't make it okay.
No, it doesn't make it okay, I think. But, so he, we once we got into second chamber and third chamber, then that becomes confessional. So we're admitting dark sins to each other. We don't really have a priest that we're saying it to. We are kneeling before the altar and we're saying it to the altar. We're not, a priest is not absolving us of our sins. That's our personal being's job to know if we've comprehended enough about how awful we were or something. And do understand, I am describing this as someone who experienced a lot of negativity and a lot of personal trauma from all of this. So I have my own flavor about all of this.
Someone could be telling us about this as if it were a very positive,
the best thing in the world. Yes, exactly.
I mean, it strikes me Samael is both claiming to be this outside the box thinker doing all this stuff, but now you're describing a Catholic rite. I mean, just in other terms, and he's from a Catholic country, right? A Catholic continent.
Right.
So I see the plagiarism there. I mean, plagiarism of Crowley, but also it's just like he took his Catholicism, put it on the second tier and said, okay, now let's go do all the Catholic stuff.
Right. Pretty much. And what we were told about why so much of Samael's language in his doctrine sounded similar to like other writers like Blavatsky and Steiner and whatnot, was that all awakened people, all awakening practitioners have the same revelations. They'll all come to the same truths. And he himself wrote that enlightened people don't argue, they only agree with one another. So if you don't agree with him and his teachings and methods, it means that you're not enlightened. And that's proof that his teachings are real and true. And, while now I see that claim as, if Samael was having all of these experiences on his own about the validity of the path, these sort of specific revelations, why couldn't he have put it in his own words?
Yeah, I mean, it is a trope of occultism that there is the one religion of truth, right?
Yeah.
I guess where it becomes toxic is when, unlike somebody like Levy or Blavatsky, it becomes this rigorous practice.
Right. Yeah. If you're creating a dogma about it, and it's if you're not following the teachings, you are damning your soul. You are following a dead end path. And I think you have to. I personally feel like that's too big of a weight to place upon your practice. Like if you want to practice, these there's so much in these teachings, not just not Samael's necessarily, but like the Theosophical Society and the interesting psychological ideas of self and consciousness. Like all of that's really interesting and worth investigating, but kind of I personally see it more in the realm of like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like it's fun ideas to play with, and you shouldn't necessarily, like, you can grow from those things, but you shouldn't put the damnation of your own soul on whether you get it right or not.
Yeah, those are tough terms, and it's rare in occultism, I think, that we find hell manifesting in any meaningful way or damnation. It's often
Yeah, and
dispensed with.
he spoke a lot about that. I mean, gnashing of teeth, and if you had an orgasm, it was better if you tied a millstone on your neck and threw yourself into the ocean. Like that. That's how he worded it.
And the irony of lifting Crowley, who lived a life that was the opposite
Yeah.
of all of that.
Right. Yeah.
That is truly,
Yeah.
now that you say that, like at the time I was like, oh yeah, everyone lives from Crowley, but now I'm like, no, that's really weird.
It's really weird. He had a really strong opinion about Aleister Crowley too. Like he, thought he was an evil man, and
Sure.
Damnation, because not only he was awakened, black magician, he was doing the teaching incorrectly on purpose and was leading people astray.
So tell us about your journey then out. So you talked about how you got in.
Yeah.
How do you get out?
It's complicated because it's part of it is the group itself. So the group, at least my own personal experience with the 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 way the groups ended up manifesting is that we were pretty judgmental and really petty. Like I wasn't a paragon of mental health before I got into Gnosis, but I certainly became so self-critical, and it happened really slowly. Like you read these books and they have these claims and it has this absolute language about it, and that just kind of like, this is my understanding post lots of therapy, like it just kind of crawls into your brain and becomes part of how you see yourself in the world. And and the groups themselves are just sort of seeped in that internal culture of self-evaluation and self-condemnation, and we were really kind of snotty and shitty, and at least we were safe because we were on the path. Like, and just because you were a Gnostic didn't mean that you were saved. Like you had to be the best Gnostic.
Mhm.
So there was kind of a lot of competition between ourselves, and especially with the people in higher echelon, the second chamber, third chamber group, and then the missionaries themselves were very competitive about like how many people they had in their groups and how many chambers did they have open. And so that was part of it. That was the beginning, like in the end it got really, like, that part of it got really heavy. And then of course near the end, we had a couple of really awful scandals that happened.
Ooh,
And
now you're talking our
yeah.
language, Lynn.
Oh yeah, yeah. The scandals were really horrific, and the shit kind of hit the fan for like 2 years straight, with like a scandal going off here and a scandal going off there, and different groups, because the way the structures of the schools were, like, you had a center in the town, and that was the only Gnostic center in that town. And if you were on the West Coast, you might do a group. You might gather up all the centers together and have a retreat of sorts. I kind of call them more revivals than actual meditation retreats. Kind of had that flair. We were doing all these kneeling practices and chanting and stuff. Is not really meditative.
Mhm.
So it was the way those sort of the in our own my own description of it is like, while there was a hierarchy of, we had the director, we didn't have named underlings under him, but we certainly had organic influencers that sort of evolved. Like, this couple teaches this teaching in a better way than the other cult couple. So like there were organic tiers of people with supposed awakenings. So those influencers and the director, the way they handled these scandals was more about concern for the organization and the optics of gnosis, and less about the trauma that the people were actually experiencing. And that was a hard line for me.
Well, what was the shape of the scandals? Was it financial? People committing suicide? What was the shape of it?
One person that I know of committed suicide.
Okay.
So it's also a very coupling up culture because of the nature of the sexual practice. You're supposed to be married. Most missionaries, ideally, you're supposed to have a partner, because you can't have, the way the temple is structured, you can't open a fully functioning chamber especially if you're a woman and you're not married, because the priest has to run the temple and the Isis has to be his set right hand man, whatever. Um, so yes, one person committed suicide, but then part of that scandal was like her husband ended up a month after her suicide courting one of his students who was already dating somebody else. So there was that level of scandal. And so like they were hooked up within like a 3-month period after his wife committed suicide. And I am not going to evaluate whether, I don't know that person that well, whether he did it because he was like just overwhelmed with grief and couldn't handle actually feeling those feelings, or if he was actually kind of a dick and like didn't care. I don't know.
And there's also pressure to be in a union.
There's pressure to be, and like, like if you are having these astral experiences that teach you a thing, and you are creating a dogma about the certainty of that rather than, oh, this is interesting information that I can grow from, then you are going to act out in some weird ways. And that's definitely what we saw happen. People made choices that were really kind of awful based on their experience that they had. One guy, okay, so here's the biggest scandal is that my husband and I ended up moving to Spokane to open up a new center. And the gentleman that we left the school with, use the term very loosely, gentlemen, he married one of the students pretty rapidly and had a child. Again, no explanation about that. And they, he ended up being an awful assaulter, sexual assaulter of his own wife, one of the students, and he was what they now refer to as grooming 2 other women into sexual affairs. Hadn't quite crossed that line yet. And
so
it kind of felt
completely
really
against
awful.
the teaching.
Completely against the teaching, and it felt really awful that we had left the kids. There's a very like derogatory way that the missionaries view the students. They are students, not members, not congregation. Like they are underlings. But it felt like we had left the kids with a bad babysitter.
Yeah.
Because we felt responsible. They were under our care, under our tutelage, and this awful thing happened. And then in another school, there was, the teaching is what it is. You're ideally having sex every day, every night, unless your being tells you to pause or your wife partner is on her menstrual cycle. And so one guy was raping his wife on a regular basis. So like those were the major scandals. And then you just had people who had very just weird points of view about themselves, like, oh, I've awakened to this level of Sephirah and I am awake. And so it just, it lends itself to, if you don't have integrity, if you are taking advantage of the teaching in a bad way, or if you are deluded yourself because of the way that it is taught and the implicit and explicit meanings of all of it, like it can really take you down a dark path. So
So I mean,
that was
so it's not really the teaching's fault then, these scandals necessarily, or do you think that?
Well, it depends on where you lay blame then. Like this is what comes up for me. Like the teaching, like let's put aside Samael's plagiarism and influence of other occultists, and we just look at Samael and his teachings on its own. The language in the books is written in a really harsh way. You as a person, you are described as evil and you're not worth anything. The only thing that is meaningful for you is the essence that you have to grow, and you have to sacrifice the way that it's written. You have to sacrifice everything for this path, all of your pleasure, your personal interests, goals. You have to follow this path, and Gnostics tend to turn personal suffering and personal sacrifice into a virtue. And so the more that you're suffering, the more that you're doing the work right. Because your ego is so abominable that it's better to destroy that than continue another existence, because there's multiple existences, of course, to continue another existence under the yoke of your ego.
So I see the suicide in that. And would you also then attribute the mistreatment of, I mean, mostly women, because because everyone is trash in a certain sense?
Yeah.
And am I doing you a favor by being horrible to you? I'm helping you suffer.
You could, you could argue that.
Okay. Well, I mean, do you think that's what these men were doing when they were doing this to these women? Or, I mean, it just seems like
probably not consciously.
The group that you left in the man's hands, that it almost seems like that could have happened in any group where a person in a position of authority wants to take advantage of that authority. But the raping of the wife and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the only naivety on my part was thinking that we were above all of that.
Yeah, I see.
That was just a rude awakening of like, oh, we aren't different, and we are treating our scandals the same way. We're not taking care of the people that got harmed. We are, and trust me, like they threw a scapegoat under the bus and ruined her for a period of time. I won't go into those personal details, but like,
sure.
Watching that and them be like, well, that's their karma. Like, no, that's inexcusable.
So there's not only a Catholic Church response of sweeping it under the rug, but then there's also some sort of spiritual justification, which I don't think the Catholic Church got up to very much. It was just hiding. Yeah, that's dark. Yeah. That's dark. The spiritual justification. Oh.
Yeah. Ooh. For your suffering, but also like kind of a like, well, we don't need to involve ourselves with injustices in the world, because all of that, it is a very Armageddon cult. Like the end of the world is nigh, and no one really knows when that's going to be happening. But there was that one time that our director in Rome said there was going to be a bomb that went off in New York, and this whole city would be obliterated in 2015, which didn't happen. And that was, again, like that was like, oh, if that happens, I am so a Gnostic. I'm never questioning this. This is my path forever. And then it didn't happen. And he was like, oh, well, we've done such good work that the White Lodge altered that reality. And so it was very conveniently like just rearranged. So that was another like nick out of my like, oh, this is maybe not quite true with a capital T.
So was there a moment, or was it like 1,000 little cuts?
It was 1,000 little cuts.
Yeah.
It was 1,000 little cuts.
One thing after the other. So what is that day like when you say, all right, we're not going back?
Well, unfortunately, it happened mostly to myself. Like Justin, I was personally affected, and trauma isn't quite the right word, but like pretty harmful psychology developed, neuroses developed for me with the teaching. Like I, am one of those, not a black and white person, but like if the teaching says the thing, you do the thing. Whereas my husband was able to kind of like, well, I don't like that idea, but I do like these ideas. And so the rest is fine. We can live in both worlds. And I got to a point where the teachings just hurt so much that in order for me to continue to stay in, despite all the scandals and the plagiarism that we found out, um, it meant I would have to metaphorically die, and not in the good, like occultist sort of way. It was like, I am in so much pain. The fact that I couldn't get a handle of, my inability to not have an orgasm, and the advice that I got was abysmal. It was like, well, you're not doing enough pranayama. You need to pray to your divine mother more. Like, no real practical method for how I can change this. Oh, just have sex for like a minute. That's your karma. Like that was the instruction we got. Like, have sex only on a Friday. That was what Justin was told. Like, so it's just, like those little cuts, and like there was no, because suffering is a virtue, like it just got bad. It got to be a very painful experience, despite the wonderful experiences I did have. I had great meditative experiences. I had really interesting lucid dream experiences, and this is all the cake at the end of the rainbow, the gold. I don't know. That
It could be a
that is
golden cake.
available if you do all of these. If you are adhering to these things, you can have these really interesting experiences. But again, like if you are creating this dogma that is more pain than it's worth, I think it's just really troubling and sad. So at one point I just couldn't anymore. I'd had my straw, my last cut, and I was really worried because I love my husband very much. We're very weird people, and we were friends before we became Gnostics for about 7 years, and then we became Gnostics together, and then became a couple. That's sort of our timeline. And I adored this man very much, and so I leaving meant, because of the way the coupling is, leaving meant the very high risk that I would have to end my marriage, and it just crushed me. And I put that off as long as I could. And then finally, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And if this is your path, please, I give you my blessing. Go forth, young man, and do the path, and I will love you for it, but from afar, because I can't anymore. And then, as we do in the modern world, I posted something general on Facebook about how I was leaving my religion, and a week later, Justin got kicked out.
Oh, wow.
So that's something I was going to ask about.
Yeah, and he got kicked out by email. So no one called to connect with him or find out, like, oh, do you feel the same way? Are you second guessing this? Like, no one questioned it at all. All we got was this email about, and it was from our director in Rome, and it was generalized about a couple of things, but then also like, and super important, don't communicate with these people anymore, these Gnostics. It was 2 dead missionaries, the awful man in Portland that we left our school to, and then Justin and myself, and we were in bold.
Wow.
The 2 dead people and the awful guy, like they were fine, but we were written in bold. Do not communicate with these people anymore. Hard stop. So, and Justin had his own misgivings. He's realized in the time that's passed, this July will be 5 years now. So his process has been one of grief, because he got shunned. And for me, it's been rage, burn the house down. I want to understand what I did to my brain and my psychology, and I want to pick this apart, because that's what you do when you're a philosopher-ish person.
Yeah.
So, and now I am less angry and more able to see the good that I got, because there was a lot of good we got out of it. Um, uh, and Justin's like grief has been put to bed. He's invested himself in other things, and especially biking. He's gotten back into cycling a lot, uh, and his anger has gone up. It's like, oh, this was bullshit. These aspects were bullshit, and it was kind of really cruel, the teaching. So
Yeah, I have to ask because we did an episode.
yeah,
Maybe you heard it about cults and brainwashing, and I argued, and I think I'm still very much on the side of brainwashing is not real. Most religion scholars feel that's
right,
true. So that
yeah,
means that there's an element of coercion that keeps people engaged in an activity that they otherwise would not be
yeah,
doing. So particularly like when I watch Nexium or when I look at Scientology, the coercion in Nexium's case, the coercion became very more visceral, right? With the photographs that the women were taking of themselves and creating this collateral.
right,
But I also think that there were a number of members who were coerced, were in a bad situation there, but were being coerced psychologically.
yes.
Could you speak a bit about that? Do you feel like you were coerced psychologically?
I feel like I was, but no individual did that to me. I think it was a group catharsis. Like it was like group think, and we were reinforcing maybe negative or harmful behavior upon each other,
Mm-hmm.
because we're all trying to be the good little boys and girls that we are, and we're all in this together, but we're all so completely independent. Like it's kind of a strange group dynamic in that regard. And I think because it's sold, the package of Gnosis, the way that it is sold is this is the path, truth with a capital T, and you are special. It is your, if you have come across this teaching, it is karmically like beneficial for you to stay on this path. And so you're just kind of re-encouraged all of the time by reading the book. You're encouraged all the time to read the books. And, I think Samael was very sincere. I don't think he was a grifter. I think he believed in what, even if he did plagiarize, I think he believed his teaching. I think he probably had enough, maybe he had some ability. Like, this is a side note. I did read a study where there are a couple of different types of brain where, like, some people can visualize things very easily and other people cannot. And so maybe he was one of those people who could like visualize things really easily and have lucid dreams really easily and have meditative experiences very easily, because he very much talked about it like, oh, it's very simple. You just do the thing. Whereas I do not have that in my brain. I do not. I mean, I can lucid dream. It takes a fuck ton of work to get there, unless I'm at a meditation retreat where all of your stimulus is like calming down. But out in the world, like it takes me like becoming a little hermit to create those uh, um, sets of circumstances to arise. Um, uh, so does that make me less than him, or does that just make me kind of different? And do we have to evaluate in terms of awakened and not awakened, or better or worse? Can it just be like, oh, that's an interesting skill you have? I can massage people. I don't know. I like to pick apart ideology and thought, and I like to pretend I'm a poet. Like,
Right, right.
so we all have different skills. Can we just see it as different skills and different interests rather than create this very harsh, regimented have tos, absolutes in terms of your spiritual work? Like, I'm now kind of at this point, if I can keep going on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do. I'm into it.
Um, I just want to say I've listened to this podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is Conspirituality, and Derek Bears, I think his last name is, mentioned something about being a spiritual materialist, and I really love that. That like the material world and what we have around us is enough. Like, we as beings, as humans, as people talking to each other and breathing in a room somewhere. I mean, I'm on the West Coast, you're on the East. Like, That's phenomenal. Phenomenal? Wow. Phenomenal. Like, that's so interesting. And isn't that enough? And we can celebrate this other person's weird ability to visualize and dream and be an artist of the mind. And isn't that cool too? But does it have to be better or more than what I experience as a basic person?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you feel like,
And if religion feels good and helps you grow, great, do that.
So the coercion, insofar as it existed,
Yes.
was in you being made to feel less than, but you bought into your own. You bought into it yourself.
Yeah.
That hierarchy.
I take responsibility for the fact that no one made me stay.
Right.
Right? No one made me stay. No one made me read the books. No one made me try to do it the way that I did it. Like, I tried really hard. Like, I tried to follow a practice, and I tried my mindfulness, and I, did all the things, and I tried really hard and had some experiences, but some, and none of it felt like it was proof enough to be truth with a capital T, but I kind of went along to get along until maybe it would happen. Whatever it is. So I was a willing participant, and the coercion was more just like, I wanted to be involved in the community. I wanted to participate, and participating with that community meant certain things.
Which were very demanding and involved damnation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had joined a spiritualist church or a theosophical society or something, you could have certainly worked and thought as much as you wanted without feeling like your soul was on the line.
Wouldn't have to worry about having an orgasm.
Right. Yeah, not so prescriptive. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What a story, Lynn. What a story.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about the plagiarism, because that's kind of what started your inquiry.
Yeah, let's dig into that a
bit.
So Krishnamurti, who was originally part of Theosophical Society.
Yeah, I want to do an episode about Krishnamurti. Blavatsky, well, maybe not Blavatsky, but the post-Blavatskys regarded him as a potential latest
Messiah,
incarnation.
the second coming of Christ. Yeah. And he's interesting, and he's also kind of harsh. Like, when you read, like, he's not nearly as damning toward the person as Samael, but so this is the thing. Like, if you read Krishnamurti and then read Samael, it's like, oh, that's where you have some of this. And he wrote almost word for word. Granted, it's English translated into Spanish, translated back into English. The book Samael wrote, Fundamental Education, is very, very much, they're giant segments of Krishnamurti's book on education that he took directly from that. The commentaries, if you know who Maurice Nicole was, he was part of the Fourth Way School, part of Gurdjieff. The commentaries are these 5 giant volumes of the psychological teaching, and the hydrogens and a bunch of stuff I vaguely remember. The psychological teaching is directly derived from Nicole. It's the same language, self-remembering, self-observation. It's the same stuff. Of course, there's the Theosophical Society with Steiner and Ani Besant and Blavatsky. The Akashic Records and the hierarchy of the races, it's all the same teaching, almost word for word. Dion Fortune, he pulled a lot from her with Kabbalah. He just said that he said this about most of them, that they just got some things incorrectly, and because he's the avatar. So he corrected their mistakes.
He's got good taste. I mean, I like a lot of these folks.
Isn't he considered? Yes. And then the last one that I recall, and it took Justin and I a couple of times to have some conversation about it, was one of Justin's favorite writers was Lobsang Rampa, and his ideas on the laws of the universe, the structure of that, law of 3, law of 7, but that's also kind of Kabbalistic too. So yeah, that's where I can tell you where if he didn't, sometimes, because he did mention some of these people in his books, but the way that he wrote about the teaching was that it came from him. Take that for what you will.
It's such a, I mean, it's an oddly common thing, and I can't say why at this moment, but Sister Ellen White of the Seventh-day Adventists,
Right.
accused of plagiarism. Hubbard plagiarized, I think, some of the early Dianetic stuff from a different psychologist, also from Freud. It's such a common thing, but uniquely, I think, of people who are trying to start these practice-based groups. Blavatsky never really accused of plagiarism. She cited the hell out of her books. Crowley never really, but they didn't try to, like, Crowley never effectively tried to start a cult that he controlled. He just started a bunch of lodges all over the place. And it's this impulse to create this organized group. And that's what Samael had, right? Was an impulse to create this very rigid ritual practice. That somehow lends itself to plagiarism. I don't know why.
Right. Well, I kind of have a theory on that.
Oh, good.
And if you look at this is my theory. Like, if you look at the era, especially where Samael was, and maybe some of the other people that plagiarize off each other, it's an era where fact checking and finding books and coming across stuff is kind of hard. Like, you can't just Google Samael in 19 whatever. Like, that's not a thing. It didn't exist. And so you could just, and he's teaching to people in Colombia and Mexico, and I don't know if all of his members were literate. So how did they come across any of this? And if they had a question about, I came across a book about the Blavatsky, like, what does this mean that your teaching is similar to that? Oh, well, all awakened people think the same. So that's an easy way out for that to justify. That's my theory.
Yeah. And from their perspective, they've had the revelation independently, like you said. So
right. They got it first from Samael. So
yeah. So why not just copy and paste it?
Right. Yeah. And granted, he wrote a lot. So it wasn't just, I'm taking all of Blavatsky. He interpreted it and had his own ideas. It wasn't all their stuff and not him. So yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Certainly the sexual teaching was all on him.
Yes.
Like his interpretation.
Yeah, that's unique.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's just unique. It's because it sounds like these other guys, like I said, Noyes and Crowley to some extent, and it sounds like these other folks, but it combines them in a way that they never should be combined. Honestly,
I agree with you on
because
that.
they contradict each other.
There are contradictions and inconsistencies, and he just sort of excused that away, like and we just if you're invested, you have a sunk what do they call that, a sunk cost fallacy of like cost, no, I'm here, I'm invested, you are the teacher, you are the guru, you are the one who gave me this knowledge.
To put a button on it, Lynn, where are you at today in regard to all of this? How do you regard your time in this group?
I wish I got out sooner.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some regret.
There are regrets in terms of, there were things I got that I value very much and will forever cherish. And I love that I learned some really interesting stuff that I wouldn't have learned any other way. And my love of meditation, although I'm a very irregular practitioner now, I'm, it's like I had to kind of put all of that away for a while, and I'm getting back into that in baby steps. I value like we were really into listening to sacred music and classical music and world music. And so I have this whole range of music that I listen to, and my love of meditation, and just the while I already, as a person before Gnosis, I was already interested in introspection and wondering about the why of the world and what I am. And, I did learn some authentic skills about introspection. The way in which we ended up falling into it, I felt like was pretty harmful. And while I'm now in a place through my therapy that I don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, I mostly have out the baby. It's a couple of drops of bathwater like that I've left.
Yeah. So like it's tainted. All of this has been tainted by your experience.
It's pretty tainted, although the history of it is very interesting because it had such a large impact. And I feel like the New Age occult is still alive and well. Like we're seeing it with a little bit of the anti-vax stuff. Like some of the influencers of that have talked about Akashic records, and especially Steiner and his view of vaccines. And I don't remember off the top of my head all of that, but like, so they still have an impact even now. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's really interesting. Again, there's some really interesting ideas and ways of viewing the world, and you can be a very deep practitioner of spirituality and not be on this really rigid path and self-harm. So I don't know where I'm going to end up. I do like, again, like the spiritual materialism of like really just being happy in my own person and releasing all of what I had learned so I can relearn something else. And the idea of being uncertain about what existence is and who I am is very comforting, actually. Like it's great. The unknown and the unknowable is very, that's fine. It can stay a mystery. I'm very happy about that. Which is interesting. Like, what a joy to find the mystery mysterious instead of trying to chisel my way through the mystery to find the answer that might be wrong anyway.
Yeah. It reminds me of some of the Catholic, the old school Catholic, medieval Catholic cloud of unknowing, some of these texts about God being beyond, completely unknowable by humanity.
Yeah.
I like that. I've always loved that too. And
Yeah.
everything you're saying, Lynn, I mean, I think it speaks to the ideology of the show here. We believe in a pluralistic path. Yeah. I think you were a little worried. Some of your messages that Luke shared that you were going to be not quite in tune with us, but yes, we don't think you should have one path.
I felt like I'd listened to enough of your lecture, the episodes that like I had a pretty good feel, and I am definitely more critical of the overall impact of the New Thought occultism. I don't think it's all bad. I don't think, I thought especially there's some very interesting characters, and I don't believe they were all grifters or trying to do harm. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I hear that. But I mean, the pluralism is at our core. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Like loving the ideas is kind of like the way I used to think of Game of Thrones. Like I really liked Game of Thrones until I feel like the show took a shit on itself. I'm one of those who really hated how the last two seasons.
You're in
like
good
I'm one
company,
of those.
yeah.
I just we don't need to go into that. But like I never believed I was going to run into Jon Snow. Like I knew it wasn't real. It was just fun to play with and theorize about. I watched all the the YouTubers who were like doing deep dives on the weirdness of it and loved it all, and then I didn't, but but like I like thinking of spirituality in that context now. Like that's a safe place for me to go forward. And if I am spiritual, I don't know what that looks like. I'm fine with playing with stuff. I do know the joy of meditating into a deep state and discovering the different layers of the mind and how you can play with the attention, and all of that is very fun and comforting and beautiful. But I no longer have to feel like I'm special just because I had an experience. I no longer have to feel like it's more meaningful than just a flow state. Like, oh, that was nice, and now I can go connect with my husband instead of, or my friends and talk about their dumb day or something. I don't have to like evaluate the importance of my life and meaning on one experience or another.
So oddly, it was leaving the group that allowed you to transcend ego in ways you couldn't while in the group.
I would like to think of it that way. They certainly wouldn't think of it that way.
But the way you're speaking, you're less concerned with yourself.
Yeah, I really am. I have never been I have never been happier, even though I still have residue to clean up and I'm still in therapy. But I've never been happier in my life. I really haven't.
That's a wonderful note to end on, Lynn. This,
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
grateful.
It's been a long talk. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
So thank you for your time.
It's been a fantastic time.
Yes, come on. We were not at all feeling the time pass here. You talked us into a 90-minute interview, which is rare. We don't do this. This has been such a good conversation, Lynn. Oh my goodness.
Good.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that
Good.
you wanted to share this. I know it's a vulnerable thing to share this experience, and certainly
I was more
go ahead.
I was more worried about you guys because you're academics, and I I was like, can I talk their talk?
We're academics with a podcast. We're not that serious.
Right.
Yeah, no, but this has been fantastic. So enlightening, I think. I think it's going to be great for folks to hear this.
Awesome. Good.
My name is Dr. Rob C. Thompson, joined by Luke Kinnaman, Producia Discordia. Luke, say goodbye to the good people.
Bye, good people.
Goodbye, good people.
Thanking Lynn Short for this episode here on Occult Confessions.